I'm so excited to be able to share with you today about our classical studies program here at Memoria Press at the grammar school stage. So along with the study of the languages, Latin and Greek, the study of the classical world is at the heart of a classical education. And a classical education is the formation of a child's mind and soul by pointing them to what is true and good and beautiful through the catalyst of the liberal arts and the study of the Western canon of great books. You can barely read a page of those books without encountering some kind of classical allusion. So even our great English epics and English works such as Shakespeare and Milton, on every page there are all kinds of classical allusions. So students really need to be familiar with the classical world in order to be able to read the great books and fulfill the goal of a classical education. Even beyond that important overarching goal is the idea that students will enjoy their classical studies program. They will enjoy studying Roman history. They will enjoy the Greek myths. They will enjoy studying about the Middle Ages because it's a delightful study in and of itself, and it's valuable knowledge that they will be gaining. Here is the recommended order for our classical studies program in the grammar stage. First, we recommend students study Greek mythology through the use of Dulaire's Book of Greek Myths. Then we recommend famous men of Rome. After that, famous men of the Middle Ages, and then famous men of Greece, all of which come with our Memoria Press study guides. Now, some people are curious as to why we are presenting our classical studies series in that order. It may seem a little off chronologically, but students are starting with Greece. It's just that they are starting with the mythology of Greece, and then moving on to Rome, to Europe and the Middle Ages, and then back to Greece again, but this time focusing on the history of Greece and not the mythology. So it really does make sense chronologically what we are trying to accomplish. Now, some people also wonder, why are we not just presenting a straightforward history of these countries, of Rome and of Greece? And the reason is because we are trying to honor a tradition presenting history to young children in the form of biography and not just straightforward history. Students at a young age are inspired by the great deeds of characters in history, and they're able to really grasp and understand when you present just a character as a hero. And they enjoy that, they love that, they delight in that in the same way that they enjoy reading about a fictional character in literature. So history really requires skills that young students don't yet have. It requires analysis and interpretation, and our young students at the grammar school stage are simply not ready for those important skills. We begin with Dulaire's Book of Greek Myths, and we believe that this text provides a very gentle introduction to Greek mythology for young students. So at our school, our model school for Memoria Press, Highlands Latin School, we begin studying Greek mythology as young as third grade, so it's certainly appropriate for that age. So the reason why we've chosen Dulaire's Book of Greek Mythology is because the illustrations are beautiful, and they're really conveying what we're trying to communicate to our students. The illustrations are very warm and inviting and bright and colorful, and they really draw students in. And the storytelling is fantastic. It's great literature in and of itself. The stories are told in a very playful manner so that all of the darker elements of Greek mythology are avoided that we would want to avoid with younger students. But not only does this text hopefully foster a lifelong love of Greek mythology by just being such a captivating book, it also familiarizes students with important people and places in the classical world, in the ancient world of Greece. So students learn about the gods, Zeus and Hera, Athena, Apollo, and so on. And they also learn about important places in the classical world: Mount Olympus, Mount Parnassus, Delphi, Troy, Athens, Crete. So it's really serving this twofold purpose: delighting children, enchanting children, really drawing them in, and then also providing this mental framework for them that they will use later on in their classical studies when they are older and begin engaging with the great books. So along with the text of Dulaire's Book of Greek Myths, a study guide is provided, and that is with all of the books in our classical studies program. And each study guide is set up in a similar format. So each study guide has facts to know. These are important terms and people and places that the students will be encountering within the lesson. Vocabulary words, so we're always building our students' vocabulary with each lesson. There are comprehension questions, which really serve a dual purpose. So number one, they're helping students to step back after they've read a text and have to be able to communicate what they've learned, and we can assess whether they've understood what they've read. But then also, each question will be discussed orally, either with parents or teachers facilitating the discussion, and then students will be composing an answer. So students are also working on their writing skills through these comprehension questions. But along with the comprehension questions, there are also map skills. So these important places they're learning about, they're also learning to identify on a map. And then there are a number of activities within each lesson that will just further enrich what they have read. One example of an enrichment activity would be showing students the connection between what they're reading in Greek mythology and something else that they've read, some other knowledge that they have from another study. So an example of this would be when students read the story of Pandora. We then ask them questions, helping them to see the connection between that story and the story of what happens in the Garden of Eden that they are learning about in their Christian studies. And that brings me to one last point that I want to cover about our Greek mythology program. A lot of parents and teachers ask this question because they're concerned and they think perhaps their students will get confused in studying Greek myths alongside the narratives of Scripture. And I can decidedly say that is not the case. I've taught Greek myths for many years, and students do not get confused for several reasons. One is there's really an earnestness and a seriousness to the stories of the Bible that stands in stark contrast to what we read about in the Greek myths. The gods in these Greek myths have many human qualities. They're petty, they're jealous, they're not all-powerful, they quarrel among themselves. Whereas the God of Scripture is presented in a way in which he is holy and righteous, and there's none like him. He is all-powerful, and he is all-knowing and all-wise. And this, I find, even among young students, really generates great discussion. So they don't get confused. They understand when they're reading the Greek myths because they're written in such a playful way that this is just a story. Whereas again, there's such an earnestness to the Scriptures that students take them in the same atmosphere and tone in which they're written. So now let's move on to our Famous Men series. Famous Men of Rome, Famous Men of the Middle Ages, and then Famous Men of Greece. The texts that we use are classic texts that were used in grammar schools back in the 19th and 20th century. They're by two men who were American educators and historians. So Addison Poland and John Haran. Historians who understood the importance of teaching history to children in this way through the use of biography instead of just straightforward history. The illustrations in these books are very colorful and exciting, and they depict some of the famous people and events that are being discussed about within the text. They are also useful in the sense that many of them are portraying pieces of art that students will one day encounter perhaps in traveling or in other books that they are reading. So they're not only giving students a portrayal of the events they're reading about, but these are also works of art and exposing students to part of Western culture. The study guides for the Famous Men series are designed exactly like the Dulaire's Book of Greek Myth Study Guide. So same format with facts to know, vocabulary, comprehension questions, map skills, and enrichment activities. The only difference is that there are also some quotes provided from each of these from the famous men that the students would be learning about. Along with their study guides, you can also purchase maps of ancient Greece or ancient Rome or Italia that correspond well with what students are studying. And those maps can be used on the walls of classrooms and in home schools. Also, you can purchase some flashcards, which are very helpful in allowing students opportunity to practice the content that they're learning and be able to memorize it efficiently. So the Famous Men series really hinges on this great, simple idea. Teach children history through teaching them biography, inspire them with great characters, and they will remember those characters, they will remember the events that swirled around them, and they will believe in the future that the pursuit of history is a worthwhile endeavor. Famous Men of Rome dramatizes the Roma Aeterna, or the eternal city of Rome. It talks about how Rome was founded, and then it goes through the three time periods of Roman history: monarchy, republic, and empire. It highlights key figures such as Horatius or Julius Caesar and Constantine as it talks about each of those different time periods. This text enables students to understand the scope and the influence of the Roman era and of the Roman Empire. So it also discusses the Pax Romana and the time period in which Christ was born and how Christianity spread. Famous Men of the Middle Ages really transition students from their study of the fall of Rome to European civilization and how that developed. So it explains to students that subsequent period of history known as the Dark Ages, when the ancient world ceased and Europe really began. And it does this through introducing students to really some memorable and inspiring lives such as William the Conqueror and Charlemagne and Joan of Arc. And again, students are just excited by the twists and the plots and the drama of all of these lives, and that's how they're going to really latch on to their understanding of what happened and the importance of it during the medieval ages. So the medieval ages are so much fun for students to study. There are jousts and tournaments and lords and ladies and knights and castles and crusades and wars and kingdoms, and this is all presented to students in a really engaging and memorable way. Famous Men of Greece really unfolds the drama of two great city-states, Sparta with their military discipline and power, and Athens with their poets and philosophers and art and architecture. And then students are taken on this journey through which they see how Athens and Sparta became rivals with one another, resulting in the Peloponnesian War, and how Sparta won, and how that forever altered the history of Greece, and how really a whole new era in history was ushered in with the rise of superpowers and empires. And of course, students learn about these great events through the lives of the men who participated in them. So they learn about Pericles and Lysander and Socrates and Plato and Alexander the Great, just some of the names that they will learn about in Famous Men of Greece. It's difficult to really understand the history of the modern age, which would include American history, without first understanding the history that came before it. So we are really laying the foundation for students understanding big concepts like democracy through the study of Athens and Greece and Rome. For more information on our classical studies program, visit memoriapress.com.